I see that it is 2 minutes after 10. We'll give anybody who else who joins us. There's a little over 65 people in the learning community, which is fantastic. I want to welcome you again to this particular conversation about self-care and wellness for all. What I'm going to just lead us through is a couple of these housekeeping things. One is that it's important for us to acknowledge that our funder, what we talk about in our learning community today, what we focus on in terms of wellness and self-care, may not necessarily reflect our funder's official views. As we engage in this conversation, as we talk to each other, and this is a little less than a 2-hour conversation now, as we talk to each other, we want to be aware of the fact that the words we're using or typing in the chat do have an impact on everybody in the learning community. So we want to use words and language that offer hope, respect, and inclusion and put people first. And just to keep in mind that I, in this conversation, am acting in the role of a facilitator. And again, I invite you to consider, assess, and explore your own self-care activities and how they fit into your life and your concept and experience of wellness. Because I would venture to guess that we may share as a learning community similarities, and that wellness and self-care is going to be unique and different for everybody in this conversation. So again, I'm not here to tell you what to do. We're probably not going to discuss anything that is new to anybody. And what I would invite you to do is use this as an opportunity to really directly focus on your experience, your understanding, and what your needs may be around self-care and wellness. So before I'm going to look at the goal and then look at some learning objectives, and then I want to ask everybody a question. And actually, I'd like you to be thinking about this question as we're going over the goal. So let me pose the question. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for that thumbs up. Great and excellent. Perfect. All right. So folks, what I'm going to ask you to be thinking about as I'm going over the goal and the learning objectives is I'm going to say a phrase. And I want you to just trust the first thing that pops into your head. And I'd like you to type it in the chat, but don't send it. Don't send it until I tell you to send it. Okay? So I'm going to say a phrase. Sandy's like, what is he possibly going to say? But I'm going to say a phrase. And Sandy and everybody else, trust what comes right into your head the first time, okay? And just type it in the chat. And when I tell you to, then we'll all send it at the same time, okay? But we're going to go over the goals and we're going to go over the learning objectives before we send it. So keep it handy and be ready to send, okay? Is everybody ready? You can just give me a nod if you're ready. Okay, good. You could also throw money too, but a nod is fine as well. All right, yes, and Jessica's writing yes in the chat. That's great. Okay, Sandy, are you ready? Yep, okay, good. All right. Here we go. Self-care. The first thing that pops into your head, self-care. Write it in the chat. Don't send it. Let me repeat. Don't send it. Just type it in the chat. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go to the goal and the objectives, and then I will give you the cue when it's time to send it. So I want to say thank you to all of you, because every time I have the opportunity to facilitate this conversation is an opportunity for me to reflect on wellness and self-care, and to do that within the context of a supportive community. So I want to invite you to do the same thing. That is why we're here together today. This time is for all of us, hopefully, to have as least an interrupted opportunity as a supportive community to focus on wellness and self-care. And we're also going to have an opportunity to engage in a brief, very brief self-care activity before the conclusion of our 2 hours. So to that end, we have a couple of objectives. And the objectives are, we're going to review the golden rule, which many of us may be familiar with. We're also going to invite you, hopefully by the end, that you can recognize a minimum of 3 signs of when somebody might be in distress, that a colleague that you were working with and or a patient, a client that you may be providing services to, because your role is not necessarily to fix that, but to be aware of it and to be able to accurately report it. Also, there's a micro self-care activity called a pause, which we will engage in together. And hopefully you'll be able to talk a little bit about what the impact of engaging that is. And many of you may already, if you actually, many of you may know the acronym HALT already. And if you do, that's great. We're going to touch on it again. And if it's new to you, and even if it's not new to you, I'd like to just remind you of it as a way to think about it in terms of self-care and wellness. So those are our objectives. Now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I asked everybody to think about and to type in the chat, and you already have typed it in the chat. And I do see that somebody sent it already, and I will not name that person, and that's perfectly okay. But what I'm going to ask is I'm going to count down from 3. And when I say send, hit send. Okay. So I said the phrase self-care. So 3, 2, 1, send. Wonderful. Wonderful. They're coming in really fast. That's great. Excellent. All right. Super. So one thing I can tell, and they are coming in really fast, and I have to say I did not attend the Evelyn Wood School of Speed Reading, but what I can see here is that people are identifying very unique and specific things. And I'm going to just touch on 2 that I see together. And I love the specificity of them. Holly, as you can see there, typed new shoes. And I see Cassie is smiling at that. Liesel typed self-care equals self-prioritize. So again, and Stephanie wrote stewardship. Yeah, and Holly says foot problems, need to take care of physical pain and issues. And again, wonderful specific I statement example, because we all have unique and particular needs. So the point I really want to drive home here, and thank you for engaging in this little activity, is that the wellness and the self-care activities or needs, Myrna writes food intake. Yeah. What Robin may identify as a self-care need is it may be similar to or may overlap with what Jen or what Amber say, but it's going to be unique for each of us. Now, again, I told you I wasn't going to tell you anything new. Georgiana, I see that you are not alone in writing this, and I'm wondering if you would be willing to unmute and say a little bit more about what you typed in the chat, because my sense is, because I noticed that other people wrote it too, that you are not alone in what you wrote.
So I work with children and adults with special needs, and I have a child with special needs of my own. And so I very much value the importance of getting families and individuals' needs met. So many times, and my coworker is on here, and I'm sure she's shaking her head, I don't know how to say no. And it's very hard for me to say tomorrow's another day, or it's okay to say, no, I can't do that right now, or I can't do that today, because I'm one of those who's so worried about getting everybody else's needs met, my family, my coworkers, the individuals I support, that I never find the time to just take care of me. So.
Thank you, Georgiana. And again, thank you so much for being so specific and so generous, because you're really telling us about your work and how wellness and self-care really touches your personal life as well. And
Right.
there is the connection between those two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, folks, anybody else find self-care hard to do, to engage in? And if you do, if you, yeah, I see a couple of people, and Richard writes, setting fair boundaries. So hard to find time and balance, Karen says. Yes, thank you, Karen. Anybody else willing to, and while Pastor Michael is working on it, anybody else willing to unmute and say a little bit about why it may be hard to do? And Georgiana, I loved your elaboration, and I love the simplicity of what you said about that. It's just that it's hard to do. Yeah.
I think it is hard for some people to practice self-care because they are worried about taking care of everything that they have to take care of. But for me, the whole putting, when you're on an airplane, they tell you to put your mask on before other people's. I really try to take at least one day every weekend to spend with my friends or spend with my kid, or just do something that I really want to do, because it makes, going back to work and taking on other people's problems a lot easier.
Understood, Cassie. And again, you're dedicating, you're carving out and protecting a space for you to be able to be with fulfilling relationships, engage in fun activities that aren't related to work.
Right.
Got it.
I love self-care.
Thank you so much. And I see that Pastor Michael was able to unmute, so we'll go to him, and then we'll go to Bailey, and then we'll go to Sheila. Go ahead, Pastor Michael.
Yeah, as a pastor, I pastor Purpose Life Recovery, and I have two other certified peer support specialists that work with me. And like yesterday, one of the hardest things I had to do was bury one of mine that I lost. And after that, there was a emergency, and I had to run. And then it was a dinner and a meeting that I had to go to. And by the time I got back home last night, I was so wound up, there was no possible way that I could get any rest. So that's the biggest thing for me, is to try to find time to get away, do something else other than, sometimes I just sit down and play my guitar, and I'm done, and it feels good to do that. I think something that can make me feel good in my heart. And also, when I see my other two, my lady and my guy, stressing out, I call them in and let's talk. And so we go back and forth, and we get usually that results.
Thank you. And again, I want to underline, remember, we're not talking about anything new here. We're talking about what works for you and what you're thinking about. Pastor Michael, you really described an unbelievably full day that almost felt like an emotional roller coaster. And having to do the hardest thing that you may had to have faced, and then also having to be in a social situation where you're attending a dinner where you have to play a particular role, and you're identifying individual things that you do, playing your guitar. That's something you do for yourself. And then colleagues coming together to just talk about it. And that is a choice, folks, because it's very tempting to easily just keep focusing on the work. And as Pastor Michael said, the time needed to do that. For colleagues to come together is an investment of time. So we're going to go to Bailey, Sheila, and then Stephanie, and then and I see that people are putting wonderful things in the chat. Thank you very much. So Bailey, the floor is yours if you want to unmute, and then we'll go to Sheila.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to add that I typed in selflessness into the chat.
Yeah.
Because that one was actually really hard for me because I initially wanted to put selfishness. But I like part of my self-care is I make a point to take 2 baths a week. And so that's usually like on Sundays or Wednesdays just to help me start the week off and then get through midweek, like, okay, I can do this. And I feel selfish by doing that because I'm taking time away from my family, away from my animals, like I literally just shut everything off. But then when I don't do it, I'm like, I need this. Like this is how I regroup. And so just finding those things that, make the put into a routine kind of
Yes.
helps you feel like you're not as selfish about it.
Yes, you're engaging in self-care, not selfish behavior.
Absolutely. Yes.
And Bailey, there are 2 things you said I really want to underline because I love the language that you used to describe it. You said, and please tell me if I heard you correctly. You said, I really need this. And you said, I need this to, I think you used the word recalibrate myself.
I said regroup, but it's
regroup.
the same thing. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you really need this and you need this to regroup. And you know it. And there is a voice in your head that says, hey, Bailey, you're being really selfish because your family needs you. And you ignore that voice because you're taking care of what you need.
Absolutely. And I just realized like the benefits that I get from it, that's what makes me like, okay, just push through it. You really need this if you're going to be the best you for them.
Yes. And again, if there's one thing you walk away with from our conversation, if there's one thing, please walk away with what Bailey just said. If you're going to be the best you can for them. And remember, the bath came first. And baths don't work for everybody. Everybody has their own unique plan. But the point is that so you can be the best you for them. Go ahead, Sheila. Thanks so much for your patience. And then we'll go to Stephanie.
I was going to talk about the challenges in practicing self-care. Especially we work in the care industry. So we always tell our clients that you have to care for yourself. But in the meantime, we are trying to work a full-time job. In my case, trying to pursue a master's degree, get certifications, and all that take time and effort. And also we have we would think I'm still young, so this is the time. I'm in my prime. I need to work. I need to work towards my financial goals. And we know that this field is not the get rich quick type of thing. So you really need to try to see how you can achieve those goals for you and your family. So at the end of the day, you're doing all of this and you think about all the good things that you could do for self-care, but you don't even have the energy to do none of that. You just plop on the bed or on the couch when you get home. And that's the best self-care you could do at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. And Steph, Sheila, you're really talking about kind of like at a certain point, there's just no more. There's just no more energy. There's no more. And kind of the plopping down is all that you can really do at that moment. And trust me, I've been in many situations where all I could do is just plop down at that moment. I have found though, and I'll just throw this out. This is my personal experience. The only way to make energy is to spend energy. And that means when I have recovered enough that I can do more than just plop, it's about pursuing the things that I can that help me to sort of build that energy. But your point is well taken. The gas tank goes empty at certain points. Yeah, thank you. Stephanie, thanks so much for your patience.
Hello.
Hello.
I just wanted to add what works for me.
Please.
I went through a long time of not taking very good care of myself, and I had to figure out things that kind of worked for me. And there's actually websites out there with all kinds of checklists and little things. So I wanted to share that. This one's called themilitarywifeandmom.com, but it's just worksheets with a little checklist You can print them out, do them yourself. There's a self-care habit tracker, so you can write in what works for you and then kind of track, even if it's, 10 minutes of something, it makes a difference. It really does. There's a whole bunch of worksheets, like ways to serve others, ways to help yourself. I don't know if you can really see it, but the website really works. And then I actually took a training in some of this, and they recommended this book, which is why I said Stewardship.
Yes, yes.
It's called Trauma Stewardship, an Everyday Guide to Caring for Self While Caring for Others. And it has a lot of really good information in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right on Amazon. It's pretty cheap, but it's got a lot of different ways to help take care of yourself while you're working in this industry and helping others. So just some options out there.
Thank you. And Stephanie, Florence and others are asking, would you be willing to put that into the chat? If you could type the name of the book, and maybe if you have the website that has the tracker and the other sheets, if you could share that in the chat, it would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Now, I wanted to read something that Florence wrote because I wonder if people have this experience. Florence wrote, "My issue is my gas tank is never empty for others, only for me." Yes, I see people's heads nodding vigorously in regard to that. So folks, keeping that in mind, and you made me think of something, which is this idea that when we're in the role of providing care, or we are in the role of being a helper, the implication is, or the assumption is that we're going to do whatever it takes to get things done. And it can feel like, and somebody has alluded to this and said it already, the difference between selfishness, it can feel like you're being selfish, you're not doing your job, whatever, if you have to say at the end of a particular day, I've done everything that I can do here today. Now it's time for the day to be done. That can be very hard. And yes, that is boundary setting, that is limit setting. I will just throw out to you though, that's particularly a strong challenge for those who help, for those who provide services to other people. So the fact that we face that is a normal part of the profession. And I will also add, before we go forward with the golden rule, is that it's also one of the biggest challenges of the profession, because let's say the gas tank goes empty, and the gas tank goes empty, and the gas tank goes empty, and we're not able to come up with a wellness and self-care plan that works for us. And that may be very different for different people. For some people, charts, tracking behaviors, looking at checklists, reading books may be exactly what works for them. For other people, it may not. That kind of structure may not work. And it is our individual responsibility to figure out and to implement what works for us. The biggest challenge with that, we do whatever we need to do for as long as we need to do it to get the job done, is burnout, vicarious trauma, and then loss of workforce, because people become unwell or they have to protect themselves from their work so they can no longer do that work. So again, the thing to be thinking about is how can you be the best you for them and still preserve you? So that's the question on the table. Now, let me ask this. Who, if you remember what the golden rule is, raise your hand. And you can do it electronically, you can do it physically. Okay. Barbara, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Do unto others as you'd have them do unto yourself.
Yes, thank you. Barbara, could you repeat that one more time?
You want to treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yes. You want to treat others the way you want to be treated. Do unto others. Audrey, are you okay with that? You're on board with that? Yeah? Okay, double thumbs up. All right, great. So treat others the way you want to be treated. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and let's look at that for a minute. I have it on the slide too, but I wanted to invite somebody to say it out loud for us. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Basically, treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, it's possible within this work that we have expectations about how we're going to be treated. One might be that the people we provide services to might say good morning to us, or they might show us respect. They might behave like an adult. They might do what they're told to do if they're being told to do, if that's part of the work. They might say thank you for what they receive. I'm wondering, are there any other expectations you think, folks, that we may have of the people we provide services to? Any other expectations you think we might have? Yeah, go ahead, Bailey.
I think one of mine is just communication, and it doesn't even have to be good communication. I just need someone to make the effort, because I am a criminal justice liaison. So I work with those with mental health concerns that are incarcerated, and I just need communication. You know, I just need them to tell me what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and then I can work with that.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Pastor Michael. Yeah.
One of the things I tell people in the meetings and when I'm counseling with them, you know, in the office, stuff like that, is one thing I require is your complete honesty. That's what I want. And that way I don't care what happened.
Yeah.
If you slipped, you fell, whatever it is, just be honest with me. We can deal with it. Start there again, we move forward.
Okay. So this idea of communication and then honesty. And Patricia, I see that you're unmuted. Go ahead. What were you going to add?
Oh, I didn't know I unmuted myself.
Any expectations you can think of that maybe aren't on this list?
I just changed fields over the last 2 years, so I'm a little taken back with the lack of engagement.
Okay.
So I'm very taken back by the people who are helping others. I feel like there is no connectivity whatsoever with me and my peers. And it's quite disheartening for me. No hellos, no how's your day, no water cooler chat.
Okay.
So, and yet, you know, the clients are wonderful, you know,
okay.
very loving and kind, but not so engaging with colleagues.
Okay. Yeah. And Patricia, you're kind of widening it out even more that, you know, the impact that we have with colleagues makes a difference, and how that, you know, and it's fascinating, Patricia, because when you said that, I immediately thought, I'm wondering what kind of experiences your colleagues are having that are maybe emptying their gas tanks as well. Yeah. Did you want to comment on that, Patricia? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I see the heavy load that my colleagues do have. I've also emphasized in my supervision that I think it is important for colleagues to support colleagues.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't exactly, it's not really set up for that, much to my dismay, but I think it would be very beneficial. Just the other day, Friday, I had 3 people in my office here. We were all discussing a client. I went, oh my gosh, this is so great. I really appreciate everybody was adding something.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I think it takes the load off of any one person.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe because I'm one of the elders here. I don't know if that's part of it. But for me, it's a struggle not to have any engagement at all. It's a personal thing. I am a social person. I have to make sure that I don't derive my socialization here.
Right.
I'm lucky. My office mate is great. We have a great relationship. But the rest of the crew, much to my dismay, there is no engagement. So let me not take any more time.
No, thank you, Patricia. That's helpful. And I appreciate the elaboration. I want to underline something that Sandra wrote in the chat, which is, I feel like respect blankets everything on that list. And, you know, I really appreciate that kind of summary. And I'm going to make a statement, and I'm wondering, Marty, if it's okay if after I make this statement, if I could invite you to comment on it, if you have any comment or reaction, if that would be okay. Okay, all right. So it is normal, being in the role of providing services or care or help. It is normal as a human being doing that work to have particular expectations. It doesn't necessarily mean, given what's going on for clients or the population we may be serving, the person we may be serving at that particular moment, it doesn't necessarily mean that our expectations are going to be met. So, and I see Kevin is reacting to that too. And maybe Kevin, after Marty comments, maybe you might want to say something too, but I'll say that just one more time. It is normal. I want to normalize the fact that it's normal for us to have particular expectations, and the nature of the work, given the folks that we may be providing services to, it doesn't necessarily mean that those expectations are going to be met. So Marty, any thoughts or any reactions to that?
I think I would say it's predictable as humans that we have expectations. And I think that part of self-care is to have the insight to be able to name those expectations and to be able to challenge them for ourselves.
Right. Yes. And Marty, I'm going to add this and tell me if you're okay with it. Is it fair to say that if we have that insight and we're challenging those expectations, we might get those expectations met elsewhere and not with the clients that we're providing services to?
Well, I would hope so. You know, I think it was Freud who said, you know, the only expectation we should have when we're doing this work is a paycheck, really. and you know, I think that's so true, that we shouldn't be trying to meet our own needs. And if we notice that we're meeting our own needs, then we need to have the insight to do something about that and to meet them elsewhere. That's not the client's job.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah. Kevin, anything you'd add in terms of that statement about expectations? Like, it's normal that we have them, and it's chances are they're not really going to be met.
Yeah, so I work in two fields. I work in like public school administration, but I also do private practice work with adolescents and college age youth. And I think one of the things that I have to always maintain is this sort of unconditional positive regard for, yes, upfront, I might have a lot to impart on the young person. And I'm thinking, yeah, they need to apply what I just shared with them in the last session. But if I maintain that unconditional positive regard, I also understand that there's this developmental process and set of experiences that they have to go through. And over time, you know, I've worked with a lot of young folks who maybe I started off working with them in high school, and I've stuck around with them into college. And then I find that certain things begin to be absorbed. So in a therapeutic relationship, I think with that unconditional positive regard as a kind of a platform that you're operating from, you can allow that time developmentally for them. And if they read that from you, then I think that helps with the therapeutic relationship.
Thank you. And Kevin, I would, if you could, I'd like to comment on something that you said, if that would be all right. So before I comment on what Kevin said, I do want to read what Sandra wrote in the chat, which, and again, I love this language, and I love the way you put this, Sandra. Expectations are just premeditated disappointments. I like how That's yeah. And look at Pastor Michael. He's enjoying that too. So Kevin, you said something that I think is so powerful, and it really jumped out at me when you were talking about that developmental process that, you know, if we're fortunate enough to keep having contact with somebody, we can kind of see that developmental process. And I love the fact that you said, you know, there's this desire that we can have when we may be interacting with the person in a therapeutic way or sharing some sort of information with them. There's this desire that they would like pick it up and run with it right then and there. You know, and again, you know, I just wish you'd use this because I know it'll help you. And I'm so glad Kevin said that, because the other thing I really want to normalize for folks, a lot of the time when we cross our own boundaries or go beyond our own gas tank, it's because we care so much. We want to help so much. And that's a great thing, but we can't throw ourselves out the window at the same time. And I want to repeat that. That's a great thing. Florence said it. Most of us have a very deep need to serve others, to do this work. We're motivated for very unique, personal, deep reasons to do the work that we do. And to care that much is a gift to the profession and to the work. And we can do that and not throw ourselves out the window at the same time. Because if we do, the injuries we sustain when we hit the ground might keep us from being able to do the work. Kevin, any thoughts, any reactions to sort of what you prompted me, inspired me to kind of add to what you said? Any thoughts or any reactions to that?
The only reaction I would have is thinking about it from the standpoint of sort of the work that you do with individuals. And in education, there's a lot of work that you do with groups, like with students, and I think also with like teams and staff members. And, you know, sometimes it just takes like several methods, several touches over a period of time for people to be able to have sort of those aha moments where they begin to apply what you've shared. And, you know, I think working with my colleagues around that, in terms of that leadership component, you know, really kind of creating that time, you know, certain things are urgent and have to be done right away and from a compliance standpoint. But when it comes to just even like youth or adult learning in an education space, you know, we have to kind of create this like path. And then have those points where we're kind of inserting opportunities to learn the same information in various ways. And then we might see that there's some change along the way.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks so much. Yeah, go ahead, Pastor Michael, please.
You know, so one thing that I have become very aware of when I'm working with people, I have to understand when it's time to punt and get somebody else involved, you know, because I want to keep my arms all the way around them and do everything myself. And I don't, you know, I have a hard time letting go and let somebody else more qualified or that is like if somebody comes in, I got a couple that comes in sometimes, and I had to tell my senior pastor, I need to punt because they need marriage counseling. They don't need recovery counseling. That in addition, they can come and see me for that, but they need to deal with all of it. And so in order for me to not go crazy and trying to deal with the whole thing, I have to let go and have somebody else, get somebody else involved. That helps. That helps me. Then it frees me up to help someone else. And bring someone else.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's really knowing your limits knowing where it's time for you to turn things over. And, you know, Patricia, you've written several things in the chat that I think are really useful, as have many others. You wrote the idea of, I have found that helping, all caps, is not, all caps, the great I am, all caps, which is that we really are hopefully thinking of the work as a team, and that a team is part of it. Georgiana, I see that your hand is up. Go ahead.
So one of the things that when someone talked about coworkers not being communicative,
Yeah.
I've been at my job for 18 years. And when I first started out, we were salaried. It was the ebb and flow. 37.5 hours is your projected hours. Some weeks you may work 30, some weeks you may work 40. In the times that we're in right now, I'm no longer salaried, and 80% of my day has to be accounted for and billable. And I was asking other people, my doctor said, you see this plaque on my neck, I have to check in and check out with each patient. I have to check in when I bill. So we're in this time where it seems to me like it's become more about bill than it is about being person-centered and having that time to talk with others. A coworker will come in and want to sit down and chat, and I'm like, I have to get my 80% billable in today, so I really can't take the time to chat. So it's not intentional, but it's that these expectations are put on us.
Yes. And again, the pressure of those expectations, because as you were describing what you were describing, I was thinking, I wonder where the time is for Georgiana.
There is none, not enough hours in a day.
Yes, yes, yeah. Thank you, thanks. And Amber, I'm wondering if I could invite you to unmute and say a little bit about, because you're using the magic B word, I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about that.
I'm a director for a recovery center. I am the only staff. I do their jobs, I do their meetings, I do it all. As well as I had said before, you know, I have got 2 small children and one's having seizures, but it takes me having balance to know what I've got to deal with at that time, plus setting boundaries, like saying, okay, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to be out of here. Well, whatever we need to get done today, 6 o'clock, it's my downtime. And I have to do that for me. And the way that I explain it to them is like, if you've got a cup and it's full, I can sit here all day and pour out to y'all everything I've got. But when my cup's empty, I'm no use for you. So I have to take the balance and the boundaries to fill my cup back up where I'm back regenerated to do what I have to do for y'all.
Mm-hmm. Amber, could I ask you one follow-up question, and then we're going to move forward a little bit with the slides, but could I ask you one follow-up question? Mm-hmm. So what you described is this process of being able to set a boundary and to carry that boundary out.
Right.
The question I have for you is, can you say just a little bit about how you do that?
Time management, honestly. I might have to stay a little bit later or come in a little bit earlier, but it's just what I have to do for myself. I have to set this. And I guess it's just something I've learned to do. We have driving schedules that, you know, things are done at a certain time, and it'll all boil down to like the time management of things. Like, this is what's got to be handled today. This, okay, can be handled tomorrow. It's not a process thing that has to be done right now. I'll take care of the things that have to be done right now. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the time that it's my time to go, like, this is stuff that we can handle tomorrow. I just think it's all mainly into time management.
Okay. And again, the reason I asked Amber that question is because everybody is going to approach this differently. Amber's key to keeping the boundary is, I know this is the priority for today.
Yep.
And this can be, yes, prioritizing, Mary, and this can be tomorrow. Therefore, there's a separation there.
Right.
And that I can then execute my downtime 6 p.m. sharp. Because I'm not trying to do tomorrow. I'm not trying to do tomorrow's work today. I'm leaving it for tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Amber. And thanks for being so specific. about how you do that. So folks, I'm going to share my screen again and just throw out to you, and I see that somebody put something in the chat. I want to make sure that I see that, that this idea of expectations, yes, it's normal for us to have expectations. And the problem with expectations is that sometimes those expectations are not met. And they're not met for billions of reasons. And again, it's, as was said earlier, and I believe Marty said this, it is responsible for us to be paying attention, tuning in to our own insight about our own needs, where we're trying to meet them, and how to meet them. But I will throw out to you to consider that, you know, there could be a billion reasons why somebody who is seeking services walks in and they're in the particular place they're in. Something as what we may see as simple as that their favorite pair of pants didn't get washed, or that their day started with an argument at home. They didn't sleep well. They skipped breakfast. They didn't have access to food that morning. They slept on the street. They lost their medication at a shelter. They have unmet mental health needs. They have no money to take the train or whatever form of transportation they may have. Or there are a million other reasons. And again, we know that these millions of reasons may be impacting the way that this particular person who's seeking services presents. And yes, it doesn't mean our expectations are wrong, but they may not be met. So you might be saying to yourself in that situation, I didn't sign up for this, or this isn't my job, or I'm not trained or paid for this. I don't know if people are experiencing any of that kind of internal monologue about their work. What I'd like you to consider, and these slides will be made available to you, but what I'd like you to consider is, again, being very clear about what the boundaries or the parameters of your particular work are. Somebody wrote in the chat, let me see who wrote that. Somebody wrote in the chat, it was Patricia. The key for me was to be aware of unnecessary drama. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I'll link that to what Kevin said too, because, you know, he talked about that developmental process. And sometimes, given where that person is, that billion reasons why they may, and I'm going to use your example, Catherine, not be saying thank you. It doesn't mean that as they go through their process, they may get to a place where they say thank you. But again, because we've chosen to not let that be an expectation, it ends up just being a bonus of the work at that particular moment. That's the whole purpose of this learning community, that Marty can say something that helps you think about something in a different way and helps you to move forward. Go ahead, Holly. I see that your hand is up.
I'm a newer mental health therapist, and to help myself stay motivated and remember the little wins I've had, I keep a little notebook and I just put the client's initial and their win. And this is my personal reminder of the good I've done and how I've helped people. And I just do 1 page per quarter and very generic, HIPAA safe, but very good for me to go back and look at and reflect on.
Audrey types in the chat, Holly, that she loves that. And Holly, I know you said it was HIPAA compliant, and please feel free to decline, but I was going to ask, because you're sharing a very personal and unique tool that you've developed for yourself as a support. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to read one of the entries that you wrote that you find supportive for yourself, because it's basically, I'm going to put it this way, it's your wins journal.
Yes. So it's all client initials. I won't read those. But one learned boundaries with mom. Another one got his GED and works out. Another one is sober and prays with husband. Another one told his wife. Another one was excited to ground with kids. Another one started EMDR. Another one left her boyfriend. Another one says he's left less lonely. Another one said, once again, I've never told anyone this in my life, but you I've told again. All those little wins. Another one graduated SUD inpatient. Another one forgave the cousin, uncle, and dad. And, you know, I look at that and I know how horrific that what she forgave them for. But yeah, lots of little wins, very helpful and give me the chills when I think about them again.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the whole purpose of your keeping record of them. Because those chills help you remember, hey, I'm making a difference. I'm helping. And I would venture to guess, Holly, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but not every win that you record is the person saying to you, Holly, I never said this to anybody else before. You're the first person and you helped me get there. Some of these wins are wins that you're looking at it and saying, I see this as a win.
Yes, correct. Correct.
Okay.
A few people say good things, you know, like this is an epiphany for me, but that them saying that and stating that is really rare. Me seeing the growth and the progress in them and that they finally made a turn, turn the corner. I write these down because I see them, even if they don't necessarily realize it.
Understood. And again, I want to underline again, Holly, thank you so much. So specific, so generous. I'm seeing the good and I'm writing it down. Totally subjective, totally Holly's take from where she sits. And it's a tool that helps her to continue to do the work. Is that fair, Holly? Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again. So one thing that, and again, as I said, these slides will be shared with you, but one thing I will share with you as a tool to maybe help you set boundaries. And again, some people in this learning community conversation, and there are a little over 88 of us now, some people in this learning community conversation, it may be your role to diagnose somebody or to see particular symptoms and then, you know, form a diagnosis. That you may be paid to do that. That may be part of your training. And just like somebody who's not paid to do that, that may, you know, that may be part of your work, and for other people, it may not be. What I like to throw out, though, is as you consider your role when it comes to mental health, is that, and as I said, this list will be shared with you. These are a number of things for you to keep in mind that first and foremost, you yourself and the client and everybody else around them, part of our role, regardless of whether we diagnose or not diagnose, is that we want to keep everybody as safe as possible. And that you are in the role of an informed observer and that you can provide clear documentation about what you observe. And sometimes, again, depending on whatever your role is, you are a supportive holding until, and I'm going to use Pastor Michael's phrase on this, until you punt to somebody else who's going to actually meet that particular need or provide that particular service that you're not. And sometimes you're a bridge to the next level of care, helping that person to make the transition. And if your role is to diagnose, then that may be part of your work, but it may not be. So just keeping in mind, as a way of setting limits for yourself, you can think of the work in these pieces or these components. Sandra writes, I had a supervisor that would say that our work plants seeds, which means most of the time we won't be able to see the growth or impact. So I had to learn to not expect that external validation. Yeah. And Michelle really agrees with you, Sandra, in regard to that. So if our role is simply to observe and to be an informed reporter and to document. This is a list of things that we may see. And again, this list is going to be shared with you all. This is something that you can use as a tool if it supports what you do. But this is a list on this slide of 10 signs that you could be watching for. Again, you may not be able to diagnose or solve these situations, but you certainly can be an informed observer. You can certainly document, and you can certainly connect with colleagues who may be able to help that person or provide a particular service around any of these mental health signs. And here are a number of others. And again, these are things that you can think about as you're not necessarily solving them, you're observing them, reporting, and possibly documenting them. And I just wanted you to have a practical list that you could draw from that would help you to maybe set limits about what you're doing. And my hope is that this is offered as a practical tool. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment before we talk a little bit about this book, and just ask any thoughts or any reactions to those signs or symptoms, or thinking about the work being broken down. Any thoughts or any reactions to that? And you're more than welcome to unmute or put it in the chat. Sandy, if I could ask, Sandy S., would any thoughts, any reactions to those signs or symptoms, or the work being broken down into those steps that you would share with us?
Well, not really. I guess I don't know if it's because of the years I've been in recovery or my age. I don't feel as intense about all this as some of you all are. I'm peer support. I'm not a very well-educated person. This is something that I've wanted to, I'm a high school graduate. This is something I've always wanted to do ever since I entered recovery. I guess I'm just at a different space in my life where I find it easier to separate my work from my personal life. You know, no kids at home, grandchildren out of state. My life is very, very calm at this point, and I'm in a really great point of my recovery. So I guess I don't think about it as deeply as everyone else does, if that makes sense.
It does. And I'm wondering, and I hope, Sandy, that those lists will be helpful for you or anybody who's kind of in the position of like, you're observing certain things, but you're not necessarily the person who has to solve it. I'm wondering.
I mean, I know my limitations, and if somebody comes up with something that I feel I cannot help them with, I have a great rapport with the counselors that I work with. I go to them whenever I need guidance.
Yeah.
So I know my limitations.
Okay. Sandy, would it be okay if I asked you a follow-up question? Because you did make an I statement, and you talked about that you're a person with a high school education who has lived experience, and you're somebody who's always wanted to do this work.
I have. I did, even when I'm 60 years old. So even when I was young, I wanted, it crossed my mind because I grew up with an alcoholic father. But then as I got into my late 20s and 30s, I myself became an addict. And I did not get sober until I was 44 years old. And the day I went into recovery, I've always wanted to do this, but I didn't start doing this till about 2 years ago. So I don't know. I just guess I'm just kind of at peace with everything right now. And I try not to think too much.
Yeah. Thank you. And, you know, I want to underline, Sandy, because you may not be the only person participating in this conversation with lived experience. I want to throw out, from a wellness and self-care management perspective, is that when we do this work, and we have the gift of lived experience. And again, it takes time. And I'm thinking of I think it was Kevin who said this. I'm thinking of the process of lived experience turning into a gift that you're able to give to other people. Is that in terms of wellness and self-care, when you do this work, that's something that you have to factor in, because we all have triggers, whether we have lived experience or don't have lived experience. We all have triggers because we're human beings. And part of wellness and self-care is being able to identify those triggers and know what we might need at any given moment based on what we're being exposed to. Is that fair, Sandy? Or am I overstating that, do you think?
No, that's perfect. That's fair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to check with you on that. Florence wrote, when our lived experience is secret, it makes it hard and traumatizing. Yeah, and that certainly would speak, Florence, to the need to have sort of people around us at work and sort of not at work who we might be able to engage in a conversation.
I just wanted to add something, an observation that
Please.
It's very sad and very funny at the same time. A few years back, I worked at a church rectory. I worked at reception. I also worked in the back in the kitchen. I don't know what kind of role that was, but nevertheless, I did it. So I noticed when I first came on board, I was working with the priest and the pastor, and, you know, I was getting I only worked the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it was my hometown, there were a lot of funerals that were going on. So each Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the paperwork would come in from the funeral home, and I had to call people and make arrangements. So when it first started, I would walk in and go, oh my gosh, who died? You know, because a lot of them were my friends' parents, because it's in my hometown.
Right.
2.5 years that I worked there, you know, then we had to add everybody's name, and there was a big giant book, and I did it with such great reverence. And after 2.5 years I was there, I would walk into my shift and say, all right, who's dead? So I saw, I mean, it's comical, but it's not. I saw my own level of removal as time went on. And it was just out of self-preservation. And I saw the priests that I work with. They weren't all walking around with rosary beads and praying all day. They had to have a certain level of detachment.
Yes.
Get through.
Yeah.
That was my lesson, you know, back then, and learning that I could be there for people, but utmost, I still had to be there for myself, front and foremost.
Yes.
So it was the balance to achieve with, you know, oh my God, who died, to who's dead, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really had to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know,
And
Patricia, I go ahead, please, go ahead.
I have to realize that I can't look to raise my self-esteem by doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
My self-esteem has to be derived from other sources.
Yeah.
It's not that because, oh, I helped them, oh my gosh, I am so wonderful. No, it's because I am so full that I am able to do it. And I have to continually to fill my plate so I have plenty to give out.
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious of that, not to be deriving I did for someone that makes me better.
Yes. Yes. And that's also what Marty was alluding to as well, that you're really you're willing to explore and develop insight about your motivation to do the work.
Correct. Correct.
And let's make an important distinction. And Patricia, tell me if you're on the same page with this. There's a distinction between deriving one's self-esteem from what you're doing and feeling good about what you're doing. Those can be very separate things.
Correct.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And you know, there's something else that Patricia said that I really want to underline. which was the change that you described over that 2 years. You framed that, and please tell me if I heard you correctly, you framed it as that was your adaptation for self-preservation.
Yeah, I was very conscious of it that I did that. And I think it was out of self-preservation, because if I took so much on, you know, I would not be able to. And I watched The Priest. I marveled at what they did.
Yes.
I saw, you know, here they're involved with, you know, birth and death.
Yeah.
To the extreme, to the upteenth extremes.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot just by observing them, that they had to, although they were in it, they weren't so immersed in it that they lost themselves.
Yes.
Really important for me to see that with the, you know, the beginning of life and the end of life. All the themes that they were involved in. And,
absolutely.
And I'll make you laugh. I used to be the confessional box for all of them. They used to come to my desk and tell me their woes. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? But you know what? I did it with humor. I maintained a good sense of humor, which was helpful. And I humor often. It's a good diffuser.
Yeah.
It lightens, you know, and I'll say it right here. And my own mother's going to my own mom's funeral. I was in the car with my friend and my son, and we were like hysterical laughing over something, you know. But that's always been a part of our life, is humor.
Right. Yep.
So
it's part of your coping strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in reality, but you know, to lighten the load of what was. It's not like I'm in reality.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Thank you, Patricia. So I want to draw one other distinction from something that Patricia said, which is intentionally engaging in wellness and self-care to self-preserve using humor, other things that work for you, is different than feeling like you have to defend yourself against the stories that you're hearing, the behavior that you're experiencing. And when you've crossed the line into you're having to defend against those things, that's where self-care and wellness really become absolutely critical, because engaging in self-care and wellness can help you not cross the line into where you have to defend against those things. Because if you're defending, you're going to shut down at some point. You're going to find every way you can in order to kind of cut off from the situation to protect yourself. And that is where consistent wellness and self-care, whatever that may mean for you, becomes very, very valuable and very important. And Bailey, you know, you wrote in the chat, self-esteem is rooted in self-care. In my opinion, when you are aware of what you need, you know how to be better. So again, keeping in mind that wellness and self-care are really connected also to self-esteem. And that's very different than the voice of I'm being selfish if I care for myself. To take care of oneself is good esteem. What do you think about that, folks? Do you think that taking care of yourself is good esteem? Patricia says yes. What other people think? To take care of yourself is good esteem. What do you think? Let's get everybody to weigh in on that, because I appreciate Richard's question. If you think that taking care of yourself is a sign of self-esteem, type a Y in the chat. If you don't think it's a sign of self-esteem, type an N in the chat. And if you're unsure, because that's a possibility, type a U. So far, oh no, yeah, and Richard elaborated that it doesn't take away from taking care of our clients. Absolutely. Absolutely. You still want to be able to do your job, and you also want to be able to take care of yourself at the same time. And that goes back to the balance piece of it. The balance piece. Yeah, go ahead, Eric, please.
I take from that statement that if I feel it is important for me to take care of myself, that is an indicator that I have healthy self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yep. And Ruth wrote in the chat, yes, you must know what is your best interest before you can help others. This is not being selfish. And you read it here. Ruth said that. Yeah. And Florence also notes, because again, we're looking at all possibilities here, you can have self-esteem even if you're bad at self-care. And I'm not exactly sure, Florence, what bad at self-care necessarily means, and maybe you can elaborate on that. But thoughts about that, Florence, what you mean by bad at self-care. And Florence will either unmute or maybe put that in the chat. Yeah. And Pastor Michael is writing the idea of having, I personally disagree. Patricia, say a little more about what you mean by you personally disagree. What do you disagree with? Go ahead.
I find that when I take care of myself better, better about myself, I have that much more to offer others. So it always comes back to me.
Okay.
It's a side job, and it always comes back to me.
Yep. The fact, and again, you're using a really a phrase that gets used a lot, like it's an inside job.
Yeah. Well, it is, you know, in all levels, you know, I have to look at all levels. It's not, you know, it's multi-dimensional self-care. It's not just one thing.
And, you know, I appreciated what Florence wrote, because I have a feeling that some people characterize themselves as being bad at self-care. Like they're not good at making time for themselves. They're not good at setting boundaries. And again, all I'm asking people to consider here is, what is the impact of that on you personally? And how does that impact, and could that impact cumulatively have a negative impact on your interactions in providing services? And that's, I think, one of the major reasons following your well-being and health, because that's the primary reason to be engaging in this conversation, that is a major reason to revisit this topic and to talk about this topic. Alyssa writes, for me, I know that when I am feeling down or struggling with something that really upsets me, I tend not to take care of myself during those times. Understandably, yeah. Sandra types, I think healthy self-esteem practices regular self-care, but practicing self-care doesn't necessarily mean having self-esteem. That's true too. And again, there is a relationship, but one is not dependent upon the other necessarily. But there is potentially a relationship. Yep. All right. So folks, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And I want to make you aware of a resource. And Kevin writes, absolutely. It's an intersection between knowing your numbers and the time you put into self-care on the level you can, knowing that life challenges balance. Absolutely. And again, as others have said, and Kevin is writing there, that the goal we're really trying to achieve is balance. So this is a resource. I don't know if you've ever read this book or you're aware of it. Type a Y in the chat. If it's new to you, type an N. It's called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. I'm very interested to see if people are aware of it. Yep. So far, not a lot of people are aware of it or have heard of it. It's written by these two sisters, and I find it fascinating, and offer it to you as something to consider, like one of our other colleagues in the learning community did with an excellent book, is that they identify a dynamic called the stress cycle. And I want to walk you through that, just as something to consider that we experience probably on a pretty regular basis. Somebody is familiar with the book, or they've read it. I'm not surprised. So this is their conception of the stress cycle. that is something that human beings experience. That there's an external influence. I suppose it could be internal as well, but we're focusing on external at this particular point. That is a stressor. And in this case, they use the example of a lion. So we encounter a lion and we have a reaction to that lion. And that reaction is emotional as well as physical. And oftentimes, there are three reactions that we can have when there's a stressor that we're presented with, which could be fight, flight, or freeze. Now, I want you to think about for yourselves, if you came across a lion, which one of those reactions do you think you would experience? And my hope is that you're not going to come across a lion and find out, but just type in the chat. If you were to come across a lion, which do you think would happen for you? Fight, flight, or freeze? And just type that in the chat, and then I'll tell you what I think mine would be. Yep, got a number of freezes. Somebody says it depends on the day. Absolutely. Flight, yes, absolutely. And a lot of freezes and some fight. Some people have also typed, yeah, flight and freeze. Absolutely. So again, whatever that reaction would be unique to us. And I love the fact that it would depend on the day. Might depend on if I had breakfast or not. I don't know, but something to consider. So we would have whatever reaction. The gentleman in this picture is having, he may have frozen and freeze may be his first reaction, but then he engages in flight. And keep in mind that engaging in flight is a physical expending of energy. So he engages in flight and he then gets back to his supportive community and he relates the whole tale. He tells them what happened. He tells them about his escape. And then he goes on with his life. He integrates the experience. They identify this as the completed stress cycle. Okay? The stimulus, the reaction, the physical reaction, achieving safety and balance again, and then telling the story to integrate the stressor. Okay? They identify that as the stress cycle. Now, what they suggest is that in modern life, that stress cycle is interrupted. And the interruption, there's the stimulus, and in here, they're framing it as perhaps a supervisor who looks kind of angry in this picture. So the stimulus happens, the worker has their emotional and physical reaction, and we know that the next reaction, at least in the completed stress cycle that we saw, was flight. What they suggest is that the person may have the impulse for flight, but it's blocked because they're in work. And because it's blocked, they're not able to physically expend the energy and then get back to their safe community. They end up remaining at work. So they're caught in the situation and not able to physically expend the energy and then relate the story and have any kind of resolution. So it keeps getting built up and layer upon layer upon layer. So they suggest that part of the reasons that we may get stuck in the stress cycle is that there are chronic stressors at work and maybe even at home and in daily life. So they're just happening one after the other, and they become cumulative. That social appropriateness, it's not socially acceptable when we're at work to necessarily run out of the meeting or run out of the office and get to a safe place and relate what happened and process and integrate the situation. And that it's safer in terms of our well-being, our standing in a community, being able to provide for our families, it's safer not to complete the stress cycle. And what they really suggest is that if we don't address the stress cycle, we can get so underwater that we start to not be able to do our work, and our self-care goes out the window. So I'm going to pause before we look at some of the things which I said to you would not be new to you, but when we look at some of the things that can help to complete the stress cycle. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Any thoughts, any reactions to this idea of the completed stress cycle and the incomplete stress cycle? I'm wondering, Regina, if you have any thoughts about that, if you'd be willing to unmute and share any thoughts. And then maybe we can hear from Kaylee as well.
Well, I don't think I've ever had an incomplete stress cycle, because even if I have to say, can you hold one moment and put a client on hold and scream, then I come back and say, okay, you were saying? It's the same with closing the door, coming back. You know, I walked out of a meeting, a supervisory meeting, excuse me for a second. And you walk out and you rein yourself in, because you can't explode there. They remember that forever.
Yes. Yeah. So you've really built into your experience and your practice, I'm going to just take a moment here and be able to put out what whether it's you need to scream alone or you need to talk with somebody else. You've built that into what you do.
And, you know, if you teach your clients to breathe, you learn to breathe too. You know, don't tell your clients to do something that you don't do.
Yeah. It's easy to do though, right? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Regina. Thank you. And where did Kaylee go? Did we lose Kaylee? Yeah, and Dina writes, you're being a role model. Absolutely. Brian, any thoughts, any reactions to the stress cycle, either incomplete or complete, that you'd like to share with us? Brian's in the process of unmuting, I think.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we
can hear me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I can relate to the incomplete. I don't know, I know you're not necessarily looking for the right answer, but I think, stuff going on personally with me, I feel like I'm kind of in that incomplete where there's just a lot going on at home and at work. And I just feel like, I'm kind of stuck right now. I recognize it and I realize that I'm still taking care of myself, but I definitely can see how, pretty much this whole year, I've kind of been stuck in that with stuff going on. So, I'm aware of that. Like I said, I'm still taking care of myself, which I know is super important. If that falls off, I know I'm in trouble. So that has not fallen off yet. So, and hopefully that's not yet like it's going to happen, but just something that I'm aware of.
Excellent. And, Brian is really acknowledging that he can tell that the stress cycle is not complete. And Brian, you mentioned home as well as work, because it's the combination of the two. And that your awareness has caused you to take actions to maintain that balance, but for yourself, the cycle's not getting completed.
Right.
Yeah. And you also said, and I just want to make sure that I repeat this because I think it's valuable and can be valuable for everyone, for all of us, is the idea that you're aware that if your wellness or self-care activities were to drop off, that could potentially turn into a problem.
Yeah. It'll definitely make everything else that's going on, which I don't have a lot of control over, worse, because the one thing I do have control over is that self-care, for me at least.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks for, again, being so generous with your experience.
Thank you for being you. We know we love your trainings.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks. Brian, your check is in the mail. No, I'm kidding. Thank you, Brian. That's a very kind thing to say. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I just want us to walk through, again, what's going to be very obvious to many of us. These are strategies that actually research has found can be helpful for us to manage what comes up with an incompleted stress cycle. So, and again, these are evidence-based strategies, and it's not a complete list, but these are things that can help. Physical activity. And to me, when I read parts of this book, I was not surprised at how important physical activity can be. And it can be one of the hardest things, and I'm making an I statement here, it can be one of the hardest things for me to make time to do, because I sit behind, as you know, a computer a lot of the day to facilitate trainings. But I have found for myself that, and that physical activity could be gardening, that physical activity could be taking a bike ride with somebody or by myself or taking a walk, but physical activity, because it helps the body to physically move, can be really, really helpful. Connection and positive social interactions at work and outside of work. Laughter. And again, Patricia alluded to this, that, you know, being able to laugh with colleagues about things and connecting on the level of humor. Sleep, meditation, and rest. Creative expression. And again, creative expression doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, or that you're an artist. It simply means that you're coming up with a way. I remember in a variety of trainings that I've done, that people have brought coloring books and pencils, that they find that for them during the training, engaging in that kind of creative expression was helpful for them to stay alert and to manage any stress that may come up. And again, creative expression is a very broad and unique. Pastor Michael talked about playing his guitar. Affection, and that can be affection given and received. And that can be with people and pets. Allowing yourself to cry if tears are a useful strategy for you. And again, I know that none of those strategies were anything that was new and, you know, revelatory for anybody. I would like to share, though, that this strategy, this idea of wellness, is not a state of being, but a state of action, can be something powerful to consider. Yeah, Holly wrote that mood follows action, and Misha wrote prayer works for me. Absolutely.
I wanted to share a particularly trying time in my life. I am a 3-time breast cancer survivor. And it was enough one time, but 3 times. And what I did as part of my own detachment from myself to get through it, and my coping mechanism, I wore a fake nose and glasses to the hospital. Well, all I could tell you is the first time I did that, they let me wear that get up all the way to the OR. No one ever saw anything like that. But what was amazing to me was I saw everybody smiling at me before I underwent surgery. And I had the anesthesiologist points to me and he says, "Nose job, right?" And I said, "Of course." So all I could tell you was, with this, you know, humor, the funny thing about it is no one ever recognizes me at the hospital with my regular face. But when I have my nose and glasses on, they know who I am. So after years and years of going through this, 24 years to be exact, I made it to the hospital newsletter with that getup on. So it really is hilarious that that's how they recognize me. But you know what? That's what I use to help me through. And if it helped one person along the journey to recognize that they too could get through it, then my work was done. But it was very funny, and it was so therapeutic that I saw so many people smiling at me before I underwent anesthesia, and that was really important to me, to go in with a positive state of mind.
Yeah. You came up with a strategy to get the support you needed.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. Still works.
You know, Patricia, can I make a personal comment in terms of what you said?
Sure.
I'm really touched with that story, and I'm touched with it because it reminds me of how powerful it can be to just smile at somebody.
Sure. Sure.
And to be smiled at by
Yeah.
somebody.
Yep. It was dual. And that's exactly is the point. Is I thought I was doing it all for me. No, it was dual purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It was just awesome. And my first surgeon that I had was just like blown away that I did that. He was laughing so hard when I came into the OR. And that's just unforgettable. So
Yeah. And people, I don't know if you're seeing the comments in the chat, but people are putting comments in the chat. And I just want to underline something that Dina highlighted, the idea that how important positive energy is.
oh yeah. My light is too bright sometimes. I realize that. You know, people don't know what to do with me, so they have to try to dim my switch, but I'm undimmable.
That does not surprise me, Patricia. And thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm going to go ahead and just as we start to bring this conversation, yeah, Cassie loves that. Undimmable. I love that. I'm gonna share my screen one more time. So folks, if you know what this is a picture of, put it in the chat. If you have an idea of what this picture is, go ahead and put it in the chat. Yes, Leanne, it is the Grand Canyon. Yes, Eric, Terry, it's actually the Grand Canyon, Karen. Yes. Now I'm sharing this with you because I took this picture myself. And I share it with you because this is part of my wellness and self-care. I've been to the Grand Canyon 11 times, and I've hiked it, I've camped there. I would go there this afternoon if I had the time and the ability to do it. And this is a picture of our dog. His name is Emo, short for Imhotep. And if you know where that name comes from, feel free to type it in the chat. And the name is Imhotep. And I'm curious if anybody knows where that comes from. Yes, actually, Sheila, the mummy, not the mommy. Right, the mummy. It's from the movie The Mummy. It's the main character. Yeah. And one of the hobbies that I have is I love to take apart and fix clocks. Now, I would never attempt to fix this clock because it's too delicate. But I do less delicate clocks I do try and fix. Now, I mention this all to you is because these are examples of my wellness. Things that make me feel positive energy, things that cause me to connect with life and nature. And one of the takeaways from this conversation, and we've gotten really beautiful and personal and really generous examples from people in the learning community today, is that, and I'm going to use Patricia's words here, that's an inside job. We figure out what feeds, calms, nurtures, makes things safe for us. And that's unique. Nobody but us can give us that combination of elements or prescriptions. So this is a very brief, very micro technique that I'd like to share with you, and it's called a pause. And I'd like to share this with you. And it was alluded to already by one of our colleagues in the learning community, alluded to this already. And this pause, I'd like to suggest we try it all together with breath, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do is allow yourself to be as comfortable as you can possibly be. If you'd like to, you're more than welcome to close your eyes, but you don't have to. And what I'm going to ask us all to do once together is just take a deep breath in and just hold it for just a moment and then let it out. And just hold being empty for just a moment. and then allow yourself to breathe naturally. Okay? Now, what I'm going to ask you to do on your own, and I'm going to do it with you, but everybody will do it at their own pace because we all breathe differently, is what I'm going to ask you to do is just focus on taking a breath in, pausing, letting the breath out, and pausing. And I'm going to ask you to do that on your own 5 times. Okay? So if you can, in this particular moment, not being distracted, if you want to close your eyes, you can, you don't have to, but just take in, pause, let go, pause, 5 breaths. And when you've completed that, and I'm going to do it with you, when you've completed it, just type a Y in the chat. Okay, it looks like just about everybody, almost everybody. And again, when you've completed it, go ahead and put a Y in the chat. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you feel open to doing this, if you could use one word to describe how you feel right now, and there's no right or wrong here, it's just one word that would describe how you feel. Just type it into the chat. So calm, relaxed, lighter, relaxed, peace, peaceful, calm, enriched, calm, relaxed, ready, lighter, peaceful. So again, there's no right or wrong here. It's just how present, it's just okay. It's just how you feel at this particular moment. Yep. Relieved, present, dizzy, okay. Sleepy, centered. Excellent. Okay. So what I'd like you to consider in regard to enhanced, at first I felt hurry up and breathe, then I lost count. Okay, yeah. So you kind of gave into it and allowed yourself to do it. Okay. So what I'd like you to consider, folks, and again, these are just what I like to call micro wellness and self-care behaviors, is I'd like you to consider that you can start your day over anytime you want, and you can choose to pause. Now, we paused 5 breaths, which took less than a minute, I would venture to guess. And I want to throw out to you that this is a tool that you can put in your wellness and self-care basket, or it may be a tool you use already, or that you're being reminded that you can use, but I throw it out to you as something that is available for you at any time you, and Richard is letting us know they say that in AA, that you can start your day over at any time. And Leanne writes, one bad moment does not need to lead to a bad day. Yeah, thank you. So again, I share that with you, and thank you for doing that together. I share that with you as an opportunity for us to choose to start our day over, to take a moment to pause, to do what we need to do. Patricia mentions that it's said in Al-Anon as well. And there is possibility in the pause. I really like that. Michelle wrote that. There is possibility in the pause. Yes, absolutely. So the other thing that you can do, and again, these are, like I said, these are micro behaviors that I'm sharing with you, is that you can intentionally focus your attention. You can focus on your body, and you can choose to do that from your feet all the way to the top of your head. You can focus on your thoughts. What am I thinking at this particular moment? What's running through my mind? And you can focus on your emotions. What am I feeling at this particular moment? And this is a longer kind of inventory pause that you can do as well. So again, a second sort of micro wellness and self-care behavior. And I refer to this as focusing your attention. You can ask yourself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And if you are, and I believe that this is used in 12-step recovery as well, this acronym of HALT. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And if you are, it means that that's a need. Yep, some people are confirming that. Yes, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Sandra, that it is also used in recovery, this acronym of HALT. If you find that you're hungry and you need to eat something, even if you can't eat something right now, you can acknowledge your need and let yourself know you will meet that need when you have the time to be able to do so. And again, just, yeah, anger management as well. You're absolutely right, Florence. Yeah, and Patricia writes, don't get hangry. Yes, yeah, if you're hungry, absolutely. So keeping that in mind too, folks, that's another form of just sort of spot check inventory taking. And then I just like to throw out that self-care, wellness is key. And here are just a couple of statements to take away in addition. Oh, and Howard suggests add the S for sad. Yeah, so it could be halts. Absolutely. Thank you, Howard. I will certainly consider that because I think it's a powerful addition. People may also be experiencing sadness and need to meet that need. We provide services, we interact with other people, and it's important to acknowledge that that has an impact on us. Also, knowing where and how stress shows up in your body and your reactions. And again, that idea of know thyself, I'll give a concrete example here. Sometimes my communication style, if I'm HALTS, one of those, or a couple of them, I notice that my communication style changes. I start to get very short in my answers to things. And that for me is a little bell that goes off and says, oh, Paul, maybe there's something you need. Did somebody want to say something? No, okay. If I thought that maybe somebody unmuted. Okay. Another thing, don't work alone. Don't do this work alone. And you may have colleagues, you may not. You may have a supervisor, you may not. What I suggest is that whatever kind of human service work you're doing, take advantage of what you do have. And if you need more or don't have something, do what you can to put in place. And certainly participating in this community learning community conversation is part of it. Everyone chose to be here, and you may have chosen to be here for a variety of different reasons. And all of them are valid and all of you are welcome. This can also be an opportunity to not work alone. And this idea of talking it through, you and one other person, or maybe more than one other person, wherever you may feel comfortable, welcome, and safe talking something through. Take time away as needed when possible. We have to acknowledge that sometimes we can't take time away. Our responsibilities, home, work, community responsibilities don't allow us to necessarily take time away right at the moment we may need it. But again, we can acknowledge that need and make a plan to take the time when we can. Some organizations have employee assistance programs or other benefits. I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to lose vacation time because I don't make the time to take it. And that's not because I don't need a vacation. It's because I need to continue to work on, yes, respite rooms. That's it. Thank you, Richard. Very important to be reminded of that. And I am the one who is working, yeah, and putting it on the calendar, all in caps. Thank you, Patricia. So I am the one who's responsible for putting it on the calendar or asking for what I need to have my need met. And then making sure that you're pursuing fulfillment, and a number of people in the learning community alluded to this and elaborated on it, that you're finding fulfillment outside of the work environment, that your self-esteem doesn't rely on and is solely dependent upon your work. And Georgiana says, I tend to lose planned leave because I don't take it. Absolutely. Yep. So folks, these are just some key considerations that I wanted to leave you with as we go forward. And you can consider that you may be, we can't really, it's self-care and wellness is not just a state of being, it's a state of action. And similarly, we can't necessarily just think our way into a new way of taking care of ourselves. We actually have to act our way into a new way of thinking. And somebody earlier alluded to the fact that our behaviors have a direct impact on our feelings and our thinking. Yes. And Holly is mentioning an action plan.